it just sort of came out of nowhere. I think when I was on the phone to Paul, you know, he could hear Emily in the background saying there's a lot of blood, you know, it's all through the house. I just knew I had to keep it together.
On this episode of Beyond the Labour Ward, we're going to hear from Christina. She's had a number of pregnancies and not all of them were that straightforward, and her last pregnancy required a lot of community support. So let's hear from Christina. Thanks for joining us today, Christina. I really appreciate you coming and sharing your story. So let's just start with your first pregnancy. You weren't under my care then?
That's right.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
So I was part of the, I sort of fell under the care of, you know, our local hospital.
Yes, yep.
And it wasn't really until the very, very end that I had the opportunity to meet you.
Yeah, we'll go through that in just a minute. Let's just, so the pregnancy itself, was it a planned pregnancy?
It was a planned pregnancy, yep. And it was very straightforward.
Okay,
yeah.
So everything went well. So let's talk about the day of your labour. So how did the labour start? It sort of, I would think pretty normally. My contractions had like some sort of rhythm to them, you know, they were pretty consistent, and then all of a sudden they just started going all over the place. Right.
And there was, you know, we rang the hospital and they advised, you know, you really just need to wait until you get that consistency.
Yep.
But this continued over a long time. And
what, a day?
It was throughout the whole day.
Yep.
And I did reach a point where I was just exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And so my husband rang the hospital and said, look, we've kind of reached a point where we just need to come in and get checked out. Mm-hmm. And if you have to send us home, then you send us home. But we've reached a point of we can't do any more at home now.
Right.
So we made the journey in and we got there, and we then realised and were told that I was 8 centimetres at that point.
Okay, so your first examination,
yep.
You're 8 centimetres.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that?
I think at that point in time I was a little bit shocked. I just didn't expect that we'd get that far at home, just from everything that you're told in the lead up to that it can be a very slow process. Being a first time, you know, through this, you just have no idea what to expect or even what your pain threshold is like.
Yeah.
So,
That speaks good things about you.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, so then what happened after that? You got to the hospital, you're 8 centimetres.
We did. We had the head sort of midwife, you know, she made her assessment, and at that point in time is when she thought that she had poked our baby in the eye.
Right.
And
so she felt that she could feel an eye.
That's right.
Right, okay.
So we sort of looked at her, you know, eagerly, like, what does this mean? And that's when she then asked for a doctor to come in.
Right.
She then ended up saying, this is really beyond my experience. So they then called another doctor in.
Right.
And they ended up having a quiet chat, but at this stage they already felt like there was a bit of commotion in the room, and we were getting quite nervous.
Yeah. So just for the people at home, to explain that normally when a head is coming through the pelvis, you can't feel any eyes. It's normally you're feeling the top part of the head here, and you're feeling just the bony structures. But if you're starting to feel some eyes, then the baby's in a bad position or not in a good position to come out, because it's the face coming out. It's like this diameter here, which is a really wide diameter, and most women's pelvises can't, you know, fit that diameter. So that's why they were probably a bit concerned.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's when your name was then thrown around the room, and it was, luckily you were there at the time assisting another family.
Right.
And they then said, we will just need to get Peter in here. And before we knew it, you had stepped into the room and the chaos had just it just disappeared. It was, you could hear a pin drop.
Right.
And I think it was at that point in time we thought, wow, okay, this man knows what he's doing, and he's
we won't go into those, but let's not talk about me anyway.
No, but it did sort of, that was a really big part of than where I was at personally, because I then felt calm.
Okay.
And I think that really helped us through,
Right.
you know, all the next moments.
So what do you remember next?
I remember you sitting next to me and holding my hand, actually.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, I think you explained that this was a brow presentation.
Yep.
And yeah, just explained like what exactly that meant and what your plan was, what we were going to do next. And that's when...
And at this point,
yes,
did you have any pain relief?
No, not at this point.
Nothing?
Nothing,
okay.
yeah.
Right.
So that was when you then suggested that I have an epidural.
Yep.
And I think in my head at the time, I was thinking, well, I've come this far. And you sort of gently, you know, told me that, you know, the next steps really you cannot manage without this pain relief. And you wanted to give me the opportunity of having our baby naturally, but we sort of had to also plan for an emergency Caesar too.
Yeah. So brow presentation does complicate things, and a lot of people will end up delivering their baby via a cesarean. So epidural. I can't remember, did that take a long time to get in, or was it?
No, it was pretty straightforward, but I think I was a bit freaked out about the needle in the back.
I don't blame you. I think I would be freaking out about it too. Yeah.
But it, you know, it did happen. It all went perfectly, and and then you really just talked through how you were going to do the next steps, which from memory was to actually get hold of Emily, so I had to help push. But then it was really just to push her back in. And then pull her out with the help of forceps.
That's right.
That was if everything went to plan.
It's, you know, so I do have this outwardly very calm exterior when those moments are about to happen, but inside I'm usually palpitating, you know, trying to not give the game away that I'm, you know. But yeah, so to deliver the baby, you've really got to push the baby back up inside, which is not a particularly comfortable process. We've got a special forceps, which are called Keelan's forceps, that help rotate the baby around, because usually the baby's facing the wrong way at the same time. And once we get the baby in the right position, then we're able to deliver. And so that's what happened, I think.
At the time, you did sort of say to us there are only about 3% of births that are brow presentation.
That's right,
so it was a really big learning opportunity. And so we quite happily, you know, had lots of people.
There are a lot of people in the room
at that time, which is important, right? So that people have some idea of.
Now, did your baby have any marks on? So what's your baby's name?
Emily.
Evelyn, did she have any marks on her face?
She had a lot of bruising on her face.
Often the brow, because all that bit's what's pressing against the pelvis as it's coming out, and often they get some marks. So those beautiful, cute baby photos you want at the moment the baby's born are probably just photos of a bruised, battered baby. So.
And initially, she sort of the head shape was quite. I'm not sure if deformed is quite
it's a good
the right
word,
but it
squished.
really was squished and misshaped, and there was a little bit of worry initially, and that's where you had a great chat with, you know, my husband and myself, and it's quite amazing like how much that little head changes in you know, a relatively short amount of time. But she bounced back. She did have the bruises, but we knew that she was going to be okay.
And were you able to breastfeed?
I was, but she was comp fed, so she was a little bit jaundiced as well. Well, that often when that bruising will bring out the jaundice, so that makes it more likely. But she was a great feeder, but she was comp fed from the start. Right. As long as she had something, she was happy.
And it's important to note that, you know, comp feeding a baby is just fine, you know, because you've got to feed your baby.
Absolutely,
So, now let's move on to pregnancy number 2. How many years after Emily did you conceive?
So it was 2.5 years.
Right. And so, and that pregnancy journey,
really straightforward. Very straightforward.
But this time you started with me. That's
did.
right, which was nice. I
Yes.
like that because it's continuity. I really value that.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yeah.
And then tell us about this delivery.
So on the day that my contractions started,
Yeah.
I rang my husband, and we'd already made a plan that he was in a role where he was on the phone and driving a lot and all over the place.
Yeah.
So we made a plan that I would call him, and if he was on the phone, I would hang up and I would just keep calling.
Keep calling him, okay. Yep.
And it was one of those days where he was, he just continuously got those calls. So he quickly got off, rang me back, and he knew that he had to make that long trip home.
Right.
And so I organised for my mum to look after Emily.
Right.
And it all just came on a lot quicker than what I remembered the first time round.
Okay. And so your hubby got home.
He got home.
And what sort of state were you in at that point?
Some very controlled breathing
Right.
by then.
Yep.
I was standing in the shower because I thought my waters might actually break.
Right. Yep.
And when he did get home, we just, the car was already packed,
Yep.
and we jumped in the car. We called you and just confirmed we were on the way.
And you spoke with the hospital.
We
that
spoke
you
to
were
the
coming.
hospital.
And this must have been during the night, was it? Or was it in the daytime?
No, it was in the morning,
Okay,
actually.
right. Yep.
Yes. And
Of course he was working, yes. Yeah.
yeah, and then we got a call back from the hospital.
Yep.
Who was a head midwife there, and she said, "Oh, look, I was just listening to that conversation and listening to your breathing. I'd actually like you to make your way straight through the ambulance bay.
Right.
So just follow the signs, and we'll
Yep.
have someone meet you downstairs."
Yep.
So we made it downstairs, and I had a wheelchair brought out to me, but there was just no way I could sit.
Right.
So they got a bed, and
Yep.
I really just hopped up on the bed on all fours and got whipped up into the lift.
Yep.
And we literally made it into the room.
Yep.
And as I got off that trolley and onto the other bed, my waters broke at that point.
Yep.
And then you were there.
I made it.
You made it.
That's its miracle in itself for the quick birth.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And
Okay.
you said, right, it's time to push. So
And how long did it take to push?
So from the ticket we got through
Yep.
the parking
Yep.
section there, it was 6 minutes. She was
6
born
minutes from
within
when you
6
pulled into the
minutes.
car park to when she was born.
So
Second birth, very different to the first.
it was very, very fast.
And
yeah.
at that point, when she's out, I bet you were
Yeah.
just in total disbelief.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolute shock. And I actually, I felt amazing at that point.
There is this natural endorphin thing that
Yes.
happens that no one will ever understand
Yeah.
unless you've done what you've done.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
It was a big shock to both of us. I think for Paul, he, last time he was there, he was holding my hand. It was very different. And this time he was really just, he was stepped back, and he was just not as involved because there just wasn't the time. But it was, we talk about these things all the time, and it was still just as, incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, this brings us now to our third experience. This has got a lot of ups and downs from my memory, and so let's start from the beginning of that pregnancy. Again, so firstly, what was your second child?
Amelia.
Amelia. So
She was a girl.
Okay, right. Yeah.
And I was very shocked to have a girl because I thought it didn't quite feel the same as the first pregnancy.
Yep.
But we were blessed with a girl, so
Great.
we were very happy.
Yep. Okay, so let's type number 3.
Number 3.
Yep.
So we had a 2.5. Actually, I think it was 2 years, 3 months at that point.
Yep.
Very lucky to fall pregnant with Tommy.
Yep.
Our little boy, and everything seemed fine to start with.
Yep.
It was then one morning at home that I just had a huge bleed.
Right.
And I rang my husband.
With other kids at home with you?
The 2 girls were at home
Okay.
with me. And I just thought instantly that I'd had a miscarriage because it was just way too much blood. I was very scared and obviously very emotional. And and at that time I then organised, I rang your office.
Yep. Yep.
And was asked to just, make my way in. So I put lots of towels down in the car and organised the girls to get dropped off to mum's.
And did your mum even know you were pregnant?
Not at that point.
Right.
No. And I just knew I had to keep it together. And she, being mum, was just like, yep, just drop them off. And I dropped them off and made my way in to see you.
So was your hubby home?
He wasn't home. He was at work at that time, and he was about an hour away. So,
now, part of me wants to know,
yeah,
when you had this big bleed at home and you got the other kids,
yes,
how did you keep them from seeing what was going on?
I didn't.
Right.
I didn't.
Okay.
And
how did they react when they saw this?
They were asking lots of questions.
Yeah.
But I think when I was on the phone to Paul, he could hear Emily in the background saying there's a lot of blood, it's all through the house, and I was really upset at the time. So I wasn't that calm person that I normally am. But so they definitely knew that there was something wrong. Okay. And I guess, Emily would have been about, she was under 5 and Amelia was under 2.5 at that point. So still not big people yet, but they would have sensed, that there was a bit of worry.
Yeah, okay.
But I just knew I just had to go in and see you, and you'd let me know. But I wasn't optimistic.
Yeah. And so you came to the office.
Yes.
And then what did we find?
We found a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was very emotional.
Yeah, I think I've been emotional about that.
Yeah.
But that was just the beginning of
a
lot of drama.
Oh, it was. Yeah. It really was.
So I think there was a subchorionic hematoma, which is when you have the sac of the pregnancy, which is all going well, and it's kind of got its little placenta stuck on one side, but the other side of the uterus, which hasn't got a placenta stuck to it, it's just kind of in free flow, and sometimes you can get a bleed that can happen in there, and it can sometimes be spectacular. Yeah. And that's what's happened in your case, and it can be so worrying. So did you go home after that, or we put you in the hospital then?
I went home after that, and at that point in time it was just, I think because it just sort of came out of nowhere. I did have to go and have some scans to give us a little bit more information about what exactly was going on. Yeah,
my scanning capacity is limited.
Yes.
I'm what's called a scanning hacker. I can show you a heartbeat and I then send you off to the experts to do the proper scans. Yeah.
Yes, so I had some ultrasounds, and that's where I think we found out the degree of, what was going on.
And were you continuing to bleed over the next few weeks?
There was definitely a little bit of bleeding, but not the clotting. Yeah. And we quickly sort of made a plan of, no heavy lifting. I wasn't to carry the girls around, which was hard for my middle one at the time. But we had those, fold away steps that we got out any time that we needed that, to crawl into bed and in and out of cars and and I tried to manage, but then I ended up reaching a point, I can't remember how far along I was, and this significant bleeding sort of started up again, and it was then I wasn't able to, go to work. I think that was when I got admitted to hospital.
Do you remember you had to rally a lot of support from your mum and everywhere?
This was when our village really was established and came out. Yeah. It was unbelievable. It was.
So who was helping you?
We had our family.
Yep.
So my mum, was there.
Did she come live in your house, or did she?
She didn't know, but I think when I first was admitted to hospital, and Paul had really early starts, and to try and keep that, the wheels going there, and the girls to have the consistency of still be going to daycare. She came, I think, at 5 in the morning or something.
Wow.
And, you know, luckily she doesn't live that far from us, but it's a pretty big, it's a lot of stress to put, you know, on her personal life, and I guess also for my dad, like it's, you know, it changes everything, not just for us, but for them too. And the worry, I guess, that goes on with that.
So Mum became full-time grandma.
She did.
Wow.
She did. We're also so blessed to have a great relationship with Paul's mum, and she lives close by, so we really had to, you know, get her to help out as well. So we had, you know, it kind of chopped and changed a little bit. There was a schedule in place, but everyone sort of had a timetable, and we had people, you know, in the morning, we had people picking up the kids in the afternoon. We also ended up employing someone to help with just pickups and drop-offs, you know, at other times. So it wasn't all on our mums.
I mean, it's when you really need a community to really help. So somehow, amazingly, you stopped bleeding.
Yes. And it really came down to just not moving. It was the only way to manage it.
I basically tied you to the bed in the hospital. And that's really what stopped it from bleeding.
Yes.
We weren't too sure how the delivery was going to go, though.
No.
Because we didn't know what was going to happen, whether you might have a bleed at one point that might dictate, you know, need for an urgent delivery, but it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. No.
Somehow it just the bleeding all stopped. I think you went home about 6 weeks before he was born, I think, wasn't it?
Well, I ended up being on bed rest about 6 months.
I mean, you basically went home for bed rest rather than being in the hospital.
I did, which was really great, I think, for our family, because, you know, not just with parents being on call and here, there and everywhere, but just
for your daughters to have mum at home, even if you're not able to do as much. So
that's right. And I think the pressure of, you know, being back and forth at the hospital just does take a toll. The kids were coming in their pajamas a lot.
I'm sure.
And falling asleep in the car on the way home. So being at home and just listening to your advice and giving the best chance, like, to get through this, and keeping Tom in there for as long as possible.
We did, and he grew, and then he came out.
He did.
At full term, and he had an uncomplicated normal birth.
Yes.
Which was great.
It was such a surprise, and
I wasn't expecting that. I would have thought, with all that bleeding, I thought something might happen. I think the placenta was low at one point, but it seemed to move out of the way, and then that was good.
Yeah, it was lots of surprises, one after another.
I do, you know, fondly remember just the input that your family had in your care, and I think that was really fabulous. And I think really helped get you through it. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
It's been my absolute pleasure.
And
thank you so much.
Thank you.